Our fifth story on the countdown, that Fox News channel would be pulling for the Republican nominee, whoever that might be, is a given. That executives at News Corporation have allegedly been working to suborn perjury to protect the candidacy of one individual, Mr. Giuliani, a close friend of Roger Ailes, the head of Fox News, would be monumentally inappropriate, even for Fox. David Schuster and Giuliani biographer Wayne Barrett in a moment. Day 2 of the Judith Regan lawsuit, in which the former News Corp publishing executive and former Fox News host says a senior executive at News Corp encouraged her to lie to federal investigators about her affair with Bernard Kerik, then the Homeland Security Secretary nominee, in order to protect the presidential aspirations of his mentor, Mr. Giuliani. Her lawyers telling the New York Times yesterday that Ms. Regan has proof. Would secret tapes of her phone calls and meetings be enough of a smoking gun? New York Daily News columnists George Rush and Joanna Malloy having reported back in July that Ms. Regan had secret tape recordings of her conversations with Fox executives, tapes that could, quote, not only bolster her position against News Corp, but may prove damning to more than a few Fox executives, according to one source who characterized the tapes as juicy. The suit itself does not name any executives nor offer details to support Ms. Regan's claims. But the civil complaint, 75 pages in all, filed with the state Supreme Court in Manhattan yesterday, is a fact. The other fact, that she is seeking compensatory damages of no less than $100 million, not easily dismissed. The story given added weight by breaking last night on the website of the paper of record, the New York Times, before being published on its front page this morning. But on the campaign trail in Iowa this morning, instead of addressing any of the facts in the story, candidate Giuliani was hoping to dismiss the entire thing as nothing more than small talk.
I don't respond to the story at all. I don't know anything about it, and it sounds to me like a kind of a gossip column story, more than a real story.
Last question.
Again, I think that's a gossip column story. Last thing in the world you want to do when you're running for president is respond to gossip column type stories.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that was a yes, no. Let's turn now to our Washington correspondent, David Schuster, who we mentioned in the interest of full disclosure used to work for Fox News. David, good evening.
Good evening, Keith.
The indictment of Bernard Kerik, that will soon obviously lead to the trial of Bernard Kerik. Regan's lawyer says she has evidence to back up her claims. What could be those, those juicy tapes of her conversations with Fox executives, if not evidence of what she's claiming? Giuliani here tries to dismiss the story as gossip today, didn't deny it, didn't address any component of it. Is that his best strategy right now?
Well, it may be in the short term, Keith, but in the long term, and again, we're talking maybe just a matter of weeks, as Judith Regan releases more information, releases details from these tapes, as the hearings start, as the depositions begin, we're going to learn a lot more about Bernie Kerik's affair with Judy Regan. We're going to learn a lot more about Bernie Kerik's shady financial deals. We're going to learn more about his business partnership with Rudy Giuliani. And all of this is going to serve to add even more pressure on Rudy Giuliani to give a yes or no answer. What did you know? Did you know about the affair that Bernie Kerik was having with Judith Regan or not? It was not a gossip story when Giuliani chose to make Bernie Kerik the commissioner of the New York City Police Department. It was not a gossip story when he chose to go into business partnership with Bernie Kerik. It was not a gossip story when he decided that Bernie Kerik ought to be the Homeland Security Director, and he pushed the White House to do that. And because of all this, Keith, and because of the dribs and drabs that are going to keep coming out, the questions are going to keep coming.
I think we see the timeline on this, David. That New York Daily News mentioned in the gossip columns in July was the shot across the bow from Regan to News Corp. They didn't settle with her, so she goes public yesterday. She's not likely to go away. And even if they were to settle this thing now, those allegations might linger. And if there are any doubts about that, you could ask Bill O'Reilly about Andrea Macris. Yeah. Is there any way to assess whether the story will actually impact the Giuliani campaign?
Well, listening to Giuliani campaign supporters, it has already had an impact. We had a supporter expressing great frustration to us tonight, Keith, that now you have the second news cycle in a week in which voters are being reminded that the guy that Rudy Giuliani recommended be the Director of National Security, Homeland Security, this was a guy who allegedly hid $500,000 from the IRS, allegedly concealed of a company to the mob, allegedly lied to investigators. And now with Regan's lawsuit, voters are reminded that this is the same guy, Bernie Kerik, who was carrying on an affair at an apartment in Lower Manhattan that was supposed to be reserved for 9/11 rescue workers who needed a break from the pit. And the big problem Giuliani has as far as the impact is that this story now is in the hands of Judith Regan, who's an expert when it comes to getting publicity out there. And that means she controls the story right now, not Rudy Giuliani, not Bernie Kerik, and certainly not News Corporation and not Fox News.
And the danger, ultimately, I suppose, in trying to analyze this, David, for Rudy Giuliani is this all could track back to the Giuliani issue, which is judgment and leadership and even 9/11, but he didn't have the slightest idea what was going on in the criminal or personal lives of his protege, Bernard Kerik. Trace that line for me, how that gets back to Giuliani.
The heart of Giuliani's candidacy, Keith, and we saw that again today in the first television ad that he's running in this campaign, is that he wants to promote the theme that because of 9/11, Rudy Giuliani has demonstrated the sort of leadership and judgment to defend America against terrorism. And there's no more important post in an administration, aside from the president, in terms of defending America from terrorism than the director of Homeland Security. And yet, there was Rudy Giuliani urging the White House to nominate Bernie Kerik, who now stands alleged as a crook. And that's the kind of judgment that certainly contradicts the main theme that Rudy Giuliani is trying to push forward. And to the extent that voters see Rudy Giuliani as somebody who puts cronyism over competence, that certainly is going to be a problem for the Giuliani campaign.
MSNBC's David Schuster. As always, David, great thanks.
Thanks, Keith.
Were it not for Rudolph Giuliani, there might not even be a Fox News channel. In September 1996, as Roger Ailes was preparing to launch that news station, Time Warner Cable was refusing to carry Fox News in New York City, saying it had enough news channels, thank you. Since the long-term prospects of a news network that does not have any viewers in the nation's largest media market are never very good, Mr. Ailes asked his friend, Mayor Giuliani, to intervene, which he did. After those efforts failed, the Giuliani administration announced it would broadcast Fox News on a city-run station until a federal judge blocked that plan, calling it special advocacy to reward a friend and to further a particular viewpoint. Fox News and Time Warner Cable eventually agreed to terms the following year. Some might now wonder if Fox News is paying Rudolph Giuliani back. The close special relationship has continued, Mr. Giuliani attending the White House Correspondents' Dinner this year as a guest of the News Corporation. There he is with the CEO, Rupert Murdoch, on the left. And here he is at the same event with Mr. Ailes, or as you see in the lower right hand of your screen, the back of Mr. Ailes' head as the table was seated. Let's turn now to Giuliani biographer Wayne Barrett, author of Grand Illusion, The Untold Story of Rudy Giuliani and 9/11, also a senior editor at the Village Voice. Thanks for coming in tonight, Wayne.
Glad to be here.
All right, Giuliani doesn't talk about this. Ailes goes into reprisal mode if you mention it as anything more than a casual relationship. What, to your knowledge, is the exact relationship of Rudy Giuliani and Roger Ailes?
Well, it's been extremely close for 20 years. I mean, Roger Ailes was the campaign manager for his first mayoral campaign in 1989, so this is a very deep relationship. But I think you really laid out, I mean, sure, Rudy performed Roger Ailes' marriage. Sure, there's all kinds of indications of a close personal relationship. But as with everything in the Rupert Empire, business is what counts. Mm-hmm. And it was the federal judge that you just referred to was once a prosecutor that worked for Rudy Giuliani, and she ruled against Fox and against the city. And so what did Rudy do? He basically threatened Time Warner, you're not going to keep your franchise, which was up for renewal, or you're going to have to handle all kinds of burdensome regulations from the city of New York unless you allow Fox to have this channel. Now, the incredible thing about this is the head of Time Warner was also a dear friend of Rudy Giuliani's. Richard Parsons was his finance chair for the mayoral campaign. So he had to choose between two very good friends. He had, in fact, made Dick Parsons the chairman of the Economic Development Corporation of the city of New York. So he had to choose between two friends, and he came down solidly on Roger Ailes' side, even to the extent of really ignoring a federal court decision and working out his own deal with Time Warner. Parsons winds up resigning as the EDC chair. I think his relationship, and they went way back, they were in the same law firm together in the 70s. So he certainly is tied in totally to Roger Ailes. It is a very deep relationship that's lasted many years. The funny thing about Judith Regan's complaint is that she doesn't refer to Roger Ailes by name for the first 16 pages, right? She refers to the senior executive of the company who insisted that she not come clean on things that might affect Bernie Kerik and Rudy Giuliani. And she doesn't refer to him by name, but when she first refers to him, she doesn't even give him a title. She just says Roger Ailes, whereas when she first introduces Rupert Murdoch, it's CEO of News Corporation, but Roger Ailes is so clearly part from page 1 of this complaint. He is clearly the person she is referring to as this senior executive who made all these suggestions to her that she not come clean on Bernie.
All right, so that secret's out, but here's this. Why would they want her to lie to investigators about an affair with Kerik to protect Giuliani? Certainly, as we've seen, Kerik has done much worse than this.
Well, he was having 2 affairs at the same time in the same apartment overlooking Ground Zero, and one discovered the love letter of the other, and everything blew up in his face. But I don't think it has anything to do with the affair. It has everything to do with what she learned as a very smart woman who was in Bernie's company for a very long period of time. All you have to do is look at the indictment. There are counts in the indictment of Bernie Kerik that appear to come from Judith Regan. I mean, there's this count in the indictment of $75,000 that he took for the foreword for a book that she edited that was supposed to be given to charities, the Widows Fund for Police and Fire, that instead he deposited in a secret account, a company that nobody knew about. But she had to know about it because that's how the checks came back, as deposited in that account.
Speaking of knowing about it, and I'm almost out of time, so be as brief as you can on this. If people in the Murdoch empire tried to keep her quiet on Giuliani's behalf, would Giuliani have known that, or is it possible that in this equation he's an innocent bystander in this?
Well, I wouldn't say he's an innocent bystander, but I certainly don't think there's any evidence that he knew concretely what they were doing. I think that the relationship is so close that he may well have had some awareness that Judith was a problem. He certainly had to know of her relationship with Bernie Kerik, but I don't think there's any indication that if perjury was suborned, he was knowledgeable about that.
Well, if he weren't running for president, what a fun story this would be to discuss. Wayne Barrett, the author of the 2 seminal works on Rudy Giuliani, the more recent of which, Grand Illusion, The Untold Story of Rudy Giuliani and 9/11. Great, thanks for coming in. Good to see you. Giuliani is not